Now, let me introduce you to a person that I don't know your exact age in Inbar Raz, but I do know that when you were 9 years old, you got your first, that we then called the home computer. It was a Dragon 64. So I think you all can figure out Inbar's age. You've been teaching, lecturing about internet security almost ever since then. Okay, maybe since you were 10 or so, I don't know. You now specialize in outside-the-box approach for analyzing security and finding vulnerabilities. And your goal is to protect the automotive domain from hackers. So thank you for that. The only reason that this guy is not in jail is that he chose the right side at a very early age. So please welcome Inbar Raz. Welcome.
Is this working? All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. If you don't know me, then I go on stage barefoot. Yo, David. Yes? And I'm going to talk about cars and hacking cars. We hear a lot about that, but we don't really know why things are the way they are. So let's start. What is the problem? The problem is that we use cars to transport the things that we are thinking of as the most important to us, right? Our family. And we also know that if something bad happens, then the damage is catastrophic. And every now and then we hear that there was another hack, someone did this, someone did that, but no one ever tells us why it is the way it is. Why do people keep succeeding in hacking cars? And hacking cars is a relatively new theme. It's been going on for 5 or 6 years. Everything else, we've been living with that for a decade or two, the PC, but this is a little different. So I'm going to go and cover the reasons for this being like that. Cars are actually very complex products. Unlike a regular product that you have a manufacturer for, let's say this is by Logitech, then they build it. They have a factory, they build it, they own it. But a car is actually a mostly outsourced product. For example, this is a partial list of the suppliers for the new Audi A5. And Audi makes maybe 30% of the car. And everything else is made by outside contractors called Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 companies. They make certain parts. Now, this partial list already includes 32 different manufacturers. And it's not just this particular car. All the new cars are the same. There are 20, 30, maybe even more different manufacturers, each making one particular part, and then someone has to put it all together. So it's a big and complex product. There's also a lot of code in it. It is estimated that cars have around 100, maybe 150 million lines of code. And just to give you a scale of how much that is, because it's just a number, that is more code that was needed to fly the shuttle, the space shuttle. Okay, so it's a very complex device. Now, what do you have when you have a lot of lines of code? You have bugs, right? It is estimated that the known number of bugs in the car that is being released is more or less 10,000. These are 10,000 documented problems that the manufacturer knows of, and for one reason or another chose to still release the product. Maybe they were not important, maybe they were scheduled to be fixed later. 10,000 bugs. It is estimated, however, and this is a number that we've heard from talks inside the industry, this is not a published or an official number, that the number of unknown bugs is 5 times that. In a car that you have, you just bought a brand new car, and it has 50,000 different bugs in it. So just imagine what the potential is for an attacker. Now, they made a survey, right? They asked people from the automotive software industry what did they think that their companies were doing in terms of security. And the questions were very simple. Is secure software a priority for my company? And I believe that securing the applications needed is difficult and very difficult. And you can see the numbers. Only 41% of the people who write software for cars thought that security is a priority for their company, okay? While a whopping 70% agreed that it was very difficult. And that's not even all. When asked, I believe that automakers are as knowledgeable about secure software development as the other industries, over 70% said no. And this comes from the people who write the software for the cars. So you know that right from the start, there is a security gap in the software process. Now, it's not everyone, okay? This is a survey, and it's from 3 years ago, and it covers part of the industry. And not everybody is at the same level, but I will choose the lowest common denominator because I'm trying to explain the problem. Some cars are much better than others. I want to make that clear. So, this I got from the internet, and this shows you the rough network diagram of the important parts of a vehicle from 12 years ago. So you can already see the complexity of this thing. This is like a small office. If you're a lawyer or maybe a designer, you work at a small firm, you have what? There are about 50 different computers here, okay? And there are, if you look at the colors of the lines, which are the different networks, 5, 6 different networks, right? So this is starting to look a little bit like what we call SMB, small and medium business. The network of a small and medium business. And that has a certain complexity, and usually in such workplaces, someone will be in charge of security, but you don't have that in a car. When you buy the car, you get the computers and the network, but you don't know how it's working. This, in comparison, is the diagram of a brand new car rolling out this year. This one has close to 200 different computers in it. Okay, just think about the complexity. Now, let's be fair, okay? Not all computers are as complicated and as important. For example, this is the TPMS, Tire Pressure Measurement System. It's a very small device. All it does is measure the tire pressure, and it gives you an alarm if something is wrong. But even this has 4 transmitters, right, inside the tires, and a little receiver in the car. So this is really an IoT device with firmware, right? It has a radio transmitter, and it has software running on it. And theoretically speaking, someone can hack that. Maybe there's a vulnerability in the protocol, right? This is a small computer transmitting wirelessly. On the other end of the scale, you have what we call the infotainment. This is the computer we all know, that we all interact with. It does the radio, right? You can do navigation, radio, and then there's always some car control features, maybe the air conditioning, maybe you enable all-wheel drive or anti-skid. You can set up car features from that. So that tells you that computer is connected to the cars, to some of the cars' computers. And it's also connected to the outside world, right? Sometimes it has its own cellular connection. And this is actually as complicated as the computer you have at home. It's a multi-CPU, multi-core computer with a lot of RAM. It's a strong computer, and it's running Linux or Android, modern operating system, pretty much what you would have on your tablet or PC or even your mobile phone. Now, that was just the computers. Let's look at the networks. There are, on average, 5 or 6 different types of networks in a car. Not all networks have the same characteristics. For example, the CAN bus, which is the oldest and most common bus, is also the fastest. There's almost zero latency. It's measured in microseconds because if, let's say, God forbid, you make a car crash and the crash sensors sense that there's a crash, you want the delay between the crash and the opening of the airbags to be as short as possible, like instantaneous. Other things, let's say when you drive in reverse, right, there's the camera. So that's not that important. If it's 100 millisecond late, you're a human being, your response times are 5 times that. So it's really not that big of a deal. So you have different types of networks, and sometimes you have multiple networks. You have various CAN buses serving different features in the car. So all this is starting to look very, very complicated. And this is the CAN bus. I don't want to dive into this, but I will just tell you that the one thing that this protocol does not have and does not support is authentication. The first field here that is called the arbitration field is also the ID. When you send a message, you say, hello, I am the ABS sensor, and this is what I have to say. But there is no way to enforce that. Anybody who is connected to the CAN bus can send a message saying, hello, I am the ABS sensor. There is no way to determine whether it's really them. So you can also see the risk there. Now, a car is also a project that takes a long time to make. from, roughly speaking, from the beginning of, okay, let's make a new model, and until it rolls out, it can be up to 5 years. Making cars is a sophisticated process with a lot of development and a lot of manufacturing and outsourcing. We mentioned that before, and tests. And you also have a lot of regulations, obviously, because this is a dangerous thing, right? Bad things can happen if a car is built incorrectly. There are a lot of regulations, how to write the software and how to build everything and how to connect everything, and it all has to fit. And every change that you make, you have to requalify. So it's a complicated thing. Now, looking at the same thing from the other side, when you buy a cell phone, the lifetime of a cell phone is roughly a year and a half. I know that they can last longer, but most of them, like after a year and a half, you drop them, they fall in the toilet, in your beer glass, you lose them, that's it. In comparison, a computer, maybe 5 or 6 years, right, more or less, before they're unusable because they're too slow, and then you just retire them. But a car will stay up to 15 or 20 years on the road. Maybe it's no longer yours, maybe you sell it, but this product has to be so robust that you can trust it to keep working for 15 years. And imagine what happens 5 years after it was deployed. It's running software from between 5 and 10 years earlier, right? And what happens if you have a problem? It's a big deal. Most of the cars today, with the exception of very few, have no way to remotely update their software. So if there is any problem with the car, even if it's software and it can be changed, you have to take the car back to the shop. And everybody loses. You lose time, you lose your car, the car shop loses money because instead of generating revenue by fixing cars, they're dealing with the manufacturer. The manufacturer is paying for the replacement, so everybody loses, and it's a very complex procedure, right? Now, as an attacker, we're always looking at what we call the attack vectors. How can we approach a device and find a vulnerability? And cars have a lot of that, okay? Not even what's called a connected car. Even a car that is not connected to the internet at all still has, for example, if it's electric, then the PLC, power line communications, you connect it to the charger, there's communication going on. If someone didn't do the communication well, there's a problem. What happens if remote keyless entry? There was just a research published last week. A group in Belgium found out a way to clone the key in 1.6 seconds. And they can drive away with a brand new Tesla, right? 1.6 seconds. And the infotainment system, as we said, it's actually a computer, so it has all these other vectors. You have an SD card, and the data, when it tells you on the radio, like traffic and the station name and the song name, that's a data channel. And you have cellular, and you have Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi, and USB, and it's running Android, and Android has vulnerable applications. So a car has a lot of attack vector. And the thing is that in almost any other industry as well, this is not only for cars, industries are rushing to connect their devices because it creates a better experience for the customer. Amazon just announced a connected microwave oven. Who would want to connect their microwave oven to the internet? I'm sure you can find a use case for that, and obviously they did, and obviously all the people who are going to pay for that will use that. But rushing to connect sometimes happens before thinking about all the security implications. Now, this is all theoretical, but let's cover war stories. This has all been done. Okay, this is not just theoretical. Roughly speaking, all vendors have been attacked one way or another. There's almost no one that has been left untouched. Academia has been talking about this for almost 15 years. As early as 2004, there were already articles being published about securing automotive networks. And this year, they're also talking about battery drain attacks on electric cars. So throughout the entire time, the academia is looking into this subject. And the biggest change, and the thing that actually made the whole car hacking subject go into mainstream media, was these two guys, Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek. They performed 2 different researches on the same car, the first one in 2014 and the second one in 2015. They managed to get remote control, complete remote control of a Jeep Cherokee over the internet, okay? And when I say that, it's not just the car that they own. they estimated that they could hack remotely about 300,000 different cars. When the vendor issued the recall, it recalled 1.4 million cars. Okay, so this gives you a good estimation as to the scale of the possible attack. Now, these two guys also found another problem. It's not always just hacking and taking over. Sometimes it's also a privacy issue. Now with the GDPR, things are changing rapidly. Okay, the European Union is making changes that happen around the world as well. I just rented a car last week, and it had something I've never seen before: erase all personal data. So these two guys discovered that a car that one of them owned, every time you synced your phone through Bluetooth, it copied all the information from the phone onto the system, stored it in an unsecure way, and never deleted it. So if you hack a car that was in a rental store and many other people used it, then you have all of their information. So this is a privacy issue, and it's also a problem. And of course, when Tesla came out, that's a super sexy car, and everybody wanted to do something about it. These two guys did a very good research that involved physical access. They actually took the car apart, they looked for vulnerabilities, they found a few, they reported it, and that was the beginning. And then the Chinese team, Keen Security, they eventually managed to show remote attack. They remotely took over a Tesla vehicle. So this is what we're afraid of, the remote code execution or remote car takeover. A Norwegian company showed a different access. They said, okay, instead of hacking the car, a lot of the modern cars let you control them from the mobile phone. And a mobile phone is a lot easier to hack. So they found a way to hack the mobile phone of a Tesla owner, and by that steal the car by taking over the phone. So this is a lot easier. Remember, when we're hackers, we're always looking for the weakest link. So the car might be very secure, but if your mobile phone is not secure and I hack that, then the end result is the same. Another research that came this year in April, a Dutch team found a long list of vulnerabilities in the infotainment system of a Harman system installed in all Volkswagen and Audi, if I remember correctly. And only a month later, the same team from the Tesla hack published a very long research about BMW. And it's all the same vulnerabilities in infotainment systems, and it's all there, right? And this is this year. Even though the first research was already in 2015, this happened this year. So we know that the problems are there. Now, we have rumors, unfounded and uncorroborated, that there has been an in-the-wild attack that was caught in silence by some vendor. I've been hearing that in conferences. I have no additional information. Maybe it's not true, but the rumor is already circling. Now, just to give you a broad idea, one of the things that Argus, the company I work at, does is a service of pen testing. Vendors come to us and say, okay, please test our cars. So far, with close to 100 projects, we've had 100% success rate. Okay? Every single time, we manage to get either code execution on the device or message injection to the car network. So even though most of the manufacturers now have the awareness of cybersecurity, some problems are still there, and you have to deal with that constantly. You don't need a lot of experience. You can buy this little dongle for about $9 on eBay, and this actually lets you connect to the diagnostic port in your car, and you can send messages and change stuff, and if you don't know what you're doing, you could actually cause damage. Now, there do exist protocols that enable security on the car network, but not everybody is using them. And some of the manufacturers that do use them don't implement them to their best extent. So there is still some problem going on there. Now, the big question is, what can we do? Because so far, I've basically told you, okay, so there's a problem, and I told you why there was a problem, but the big question is, what happens now? If we look at the conclusions from what I've shown you, then you will see that basically, it doesn't take a super hacker. What we're seeing, sorry, there's a delay on your side, I think. What we're seeing is that time and again, these are published vulnerabilities that have already been closed are found in systems, stuff that was already patched. Remember the long life cycle. You make a car, it takes 5 years, you roll it out, it has software from 5 years ago, it has vulnerabilities that have been closed. And they're the same, they repeat over and over again. And some of them are logical vulnerabilities, which means it's not even a bug in the code. You left access. Some ports are open while there shouldn't be. And it's not a bug, it's just someone chose a configuration that maybe wasn't as secure as they thought. So it's not all about hacking and exploiting. Sometimes the door is just open. And not everything requires top-notch research. So basically, you can be a script kiddie, someone who Googles the internet for tools, and you will have enough to take over a car. Now let's look at the economics of car hacking. The cost of operation compared to the IT security world. Now, in both of them, to find a vulnerability can be either trivial, something simple, or sophisticated. It depends on the system you're researching. But exploiting it, finding the vulnerability is one thing, but exploiting the vulnerability is completely different, because in the IT security world, where we've been dealing with this for a long time, there are many mitigation techniques that have been put in the devices over the years. But the car industry is relatively new to this, so there are not as many mitigation techniques in cars. So the distance from finding a vulnerability and exploiting it in the car world is smaller. So it's easier to actually find a vulnerability and exploit it. Now, what do you get in return? We call it the monetization. This is the principal driver for cybercrime. How much money, if at all, can you make assuming you hacked a car? So in the IT security world, this is a solved problem. There is a complete industry of making money by doing cybercrime, stealing information, selling it to others, enabling others to steal. Okay, it's called crime as a service. It's a solved problem when you're the criminal. But in cars, not so much. Ransomware, and I will add also now crypto mining, are attacks that can happen on any platform. So with the exception of those two, there's still no good way to make money by hacking a car. Right now, okay? This is not going to change, stay like that forever. And then the second question is the scale. Let's say you can hack a car. Let's say you can make money out of it. Can you do it at scale? Because if you can only do it in a small scale, hundreds, maybe thousands, it's not worth the trouble. When you can do it for millions of cars, then it starts to become profitable. And then the cybercrime will step in. And when the cybercrime steps in, then everything changes. We are actually, okay, I'm saying proven, not witnessed, because we've seen researchers do that. But we haven't seen it in the wild, with the exception of that rumor. Now, we're literally looking at the tipping point. We're at the point where it is still not possible, as far as we can tell, to exploit vehicles at scale and monetize on it. But this is rapidly changing. The reason it is like this so far is because there are many different technologies. I'm just going to do the whole thing at a time. Different standards, different manufacturers build their devices differently. And even if you develop an attack for one vehicle, it's not necessarily going to work for another one. But it's changing, because now we have technologies such as vehicle to infrastructure. All of a sudden, everybody's going to have to talk in the same language to talk to the infrastructure and to other vehicles. And ECU consolidation, taking a few different computers, putting them all in one. So this is going to change things. And I remind you that this is a big network, and we need to treat it like one. Like we would have a security expert looking at that in the office, we need the same thing for cars. Now, the solutions already exist in the IT security world. What we have to do is adapt them. You can't take them as is. They need to be rebuilt, but the solutions, what we need to do is already there. All we have to do is implement it. And we say at Argus that you have to do it multi-layer. This is true for pretty much everywhere else. I'm skipping on to make it on time. We talk a lot about security by design, but it only works if you have a security person doing that. If it's just somebody who got the job to think security, they will never do it as well. It has to be a professional security person doing your security. And if you don't have one, then hire one. Get it as a service from some company. It's okay, it's allowed to happen. And there's legislation going on now that's slightly going to change it. We hope that it is a little bit of a deterrent on one side, but also an enabler for the car industry to make cars safer. So, to sum up, cars are a complex product with a network that is as complicated as that of an office. And the tools to secure them are at reach. It's not, you don't need to do a lot of research now. It's all there, just make an adaptation. Now, there's no silver bullet. It's going to have to be, like anywhere else, layered security. You have to do this and this and this and this. And we are actually, the security industry and the car industry, are with the finger in the dike. So if we take the finger out, if we don't maintain this gap in the ability to exploit cars at scale and monetize on it, then the floodgates will all open, and then we're back in the IT security world, and we already know that everyone gets hacked all the time, and we don't want that in cars. So I'm fresh out of time and fresh out of slides. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them outside. Thank you very much.
Don't get too close.
Huh?
I don't want to step on your feet with my high heels. So
oh, that would be bad.
Let's be secure. Inbar, thank you so much. I just have one question,
yes.
please. On a scale from 1 to 10, when 10 is the best security scenario possible, where would you place the automotive industry?
It's hard to say because they're not all at the same place.
Yeah, but on average.
I would say that it's a wide range. Some of them are as low as 3, and some of them are as high as 9. No one
You're
is
a bit biased as well, but...
It's not a matter of being biased, it's a matter of having seen different cars, different platforms. Yeah. So even if I give you an average...
You're not as innocent as many people.
If you have one here and one here, then it's nice to look at the average, but there's still someone here.
Yeah,
so we need to bring everybody up.
I thought about one interview I did a few years ago with Hans Westberg. We know him as a former CEO of Ericsson, and he was so thrilled about connecting, cooperating with the truck industry, most of all, and connecting them. And but what would you say? What's the main step? What's the big step into the security? Threat for the automotive industry? When did it happen?
So I would say that with everything being connected, then the cybercrime is now looking at it, waiting for the opportunity. So we have to not give it the opportunity. If you want to connect your vehicles, make the connection secure. Obviously, the thing we're afraid of the most is remote attack. So start with that. Make sure that there is no way to remotely attack your car. When you've done that, then you can go closer. Because if your car has a Wi-Fi for the driver, then that's also an attack vector. But that wouldn't be a scale. That would be like me going one car after another. So keeping in mind that we're afraid of attacks at scale, then protect the connectivity as much as you can and have mitigations to detect if something is going on. So you can at least respond. Because if you don't know what's going on, you can't even respond.
Exactly. Let's hope for the best and expect for the worst then.
Yes. Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.